figure out what's been going on in the world and why the world has become ever less predictable and more prone to risks, and why the risks are increasing everywhere. The issues of this year's discussion have already been enumerated, and the overall theme of this year's meeting of the club is the new game rules, or a game without rules. This basically outlines a choice that all of us will have to do. The point that today's world is rapidly changing is nothing new. We all know it, and of course this has been already voiced so many times. It is difficult not to see fundamental transformations in global politics, the global economy, social life, technology, and so on. I would like to apologize in advance for repeating some of the participants in their speeches, but I believe it's impossible to avoid that, because they did speak at length and in much detail, and I'm just expressing my opinions. I might actually agree with some of the things said by some of the participants, or disagree with others. But let's not forget analyzing the present state of affairs. Let's not forget the lessons of history. You know, changing a world order. And this is exactly what we're witnessing today. Usually, such changes would be accompanied, if not by a global war or conflict, confrontation, then at least by a series of local conflicts. Secondly, global politics are primarily about economic leadership, issues of war and peace, and humanitarian issues, including human rights. There have been a lot of contradictions building up in the world, and we need to ask one another in good conscience whether we have a good insurance against confrontation. Unfortunately, there are no guarantees that the existing system of global and regional security is capable of securing us against turbulations. That system has been seriously undermined and deformed. International, regional institutions for political, economic and cultural interaction are also experiencing serious crisis these days. Indeed, a lot of the institutions for preserving peace have been created a long time ago, following the Second World War, and the system used to rely not only on the balance of powers, not only on the balance of force, and not only on the rights of the winner, but also on the fact that the founding fathers of that security system used to respect one another. And they did not try to extort something from one another by force. They were forced to seek compromise with one another. That system, despite all of its flaws, enabled the world to stay within some limits and tried to somehow mitigate the natural competition of nations, of states. The system of checks and balances that took decades to create and develop, it was something that we should not have destroyed without proposing something to replace it. Because if we had disposed of those institutions, then we would have been left with nothing to deal with the modern-day global challenges. Unfortunately, the United States, who consider themselves the winners of the Cold War, believe that there is no need in those checks and balances. And instead of trying to secure stability in the world, they actually took measures that led to a strong disbalance. The Cold War is over, but it was not over with the signing of peace. It did not end with clear-cut arrangements about some rules and standards to be observed. We have an impression that the so-called winners of the Cold War decided to get the most out of the situation, exploit it as much as possible, and refashion the whole world in accordance with their own interests and ideas. If the entire system of international law and the checks and balances were an obstacle to their intentions, they were immediately proclaimed to be outdated, obsolete, and subject to destruction. This is how a nouveau riche behaves, someone who unexpectedly gets a fortune. They start squandering their gains, believing that this will last forever. And I believe the West has made a lot of blunders because of that. We've entered into a period of mistrust in international politics, and international law used to had to be tramped by issues of political rationale and pragmatism. Total control of international media enabled our counterparts to pass something white for something black and to spin their stories any way they wanted. The opportunity to dominate the war, the abundance of satellites sometimes led to the fact that they were trying to impose their own recipes as something universal. That group had so much ambition that their own opinion developed behind closed doors were peddled as some universal values. The very idea of state sovereignty became relevant. And there was this idea sold that any ruling regime was all the more legitimate than it was loyal to this group. I will give you an opportunity to debate what I'm telling you, and you'll be able to ask questions, but do try to prove me wrong. Ways of influencing those defiant are well known and have been tried and tested so many times. There is media pressure, there is interference in the domestic affairs, and there are attempts at attributing legitimacy to attempts to meddle in the interior affairs. In recent years, we've had evidence that certain national leaders had been blackmailed. The Big Brother has been spending billions of dollars on espionage and surveillance all around the world, including spying on their closest allies. Let's all ask ourselves, how comfortable and safe do we feel living in a world like that? How just and how rational is it? Would you say we have no reasons to be concerned and ask these uncomfortable questions? Maybe the United States is exclusive in pursuing its leadership, and maybe that is a good thing. Maybe them interfering in everyone's relations all over the world is something that brings us peace, stability, prosperity, and democracy, and maybe we all should simply, let them do it to us. I dare say this is not true. Unilateral dictatorship and imposing their own templates on us has actually led to something that was very contrary to what they had intended. Instead of resolving conflicts, we see escalation. Instead of stability, we see increasing chaos. Instead of democracy, we see them supporting some very murky activists, from open Nazis to very dangerous Islamic fundamentalists, because those forces are used initially as instruments, but then they just go out of control, and their so-called masterminds get burned on that. I can't help wonder how time and again they continue to repeat their own mistakes. They used to sponsor Islamic extremist movements to fight the Soviet Union. They were tried and tested in Afghanistan and later gave rise to Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The West used to turn a blind eye, or I would actually say even support financially and in media terms to support those terrorists and their invasion in Russia from Central Asian countries. It was only after terrible terrorist attacks in the territory of the United States itself that the West actually came to realize the imminent danger of global terrorism. And I remind you, Russia was the first to support the American nation and lend them a helping hand after the terrorist attack of September 11th, 2001.